It's very nice, and it's been a pleasure to be invited to speak in this conference, and it's always good to be back to Boston in the West Coast. So this panel is supposed to be speaking about the streamline of digital health, mainly focusing on cardiovascular disease. My name is Rahaf, and I'm an internal medicine physician, and I did 18 years of practice, almost in cardiovascular, between intensive care and emergency medicine and preventive cardiology. And I'm also a master's student in the Masters of Health System Science at Sinai, which is leading me to be a scientist in AI and health system and medical extended reality and blockchain eventually. So with that being said, I welcome my panelist, Dr. Raul from Harvard School, who is a radiologist, and I bet he read cardiovascular images together with his colleagues, the cardiologist, and Mehdi, who is the CEO of Coredio. And he's creating digital twin that will enable healthcare system to monitor patients after discharge from cardiovascular procedures. I've prepared a few questions for this panel, but also I'm Dr. Alex, of course, everybody knows him. I will be sharing a few questions for this panel discussion, but please, it's an open discussion. Everybody is welcome to share their own perspective and questions as well. I thought to start with the FDA, because everybody is thinking about a regulatory path when they start the innovation, especially in cardiovascular. So FDA is making every effort to support and accommodate disruptive technologies, including health information, technologies and wearable device, telehealth, telemedicine, leading to personalized preventive cardiac care and decentralized novel health system procedures. So in this panel, I thought to ask this question, which is accuracy and efficiency are important tools to practice precise management of cardiac cases. Now, a comprehensive electronic database is available for physicians and innovators. How do each of the panelists actually think? How do you think medical extended reality can be the future of treating and guiding clinical implementation processes for acute cardiac care?
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. So I'm actually an interventional radiologist, and I read a few vascular studies from time to time. But I think it's a very good question. So I do work a lot in terms of extended reality. I do think in my talk that I'll give in a few minutes, we talk about how it's used for training and clinical care. But to your question that you're actually asking it sort of at the beginning, whenever we bring these new devices, and there is an FDA issue, and the issue is always that we as physicians are excited about doing these things, but the FDA won't approve it until you have data. And you have to have data. And so you have to validate all the things that you're using. So for us, there's always a conundrum where a company comes to us with an amazing tool. We'd like to use it. They don't have FDA approval, so we can only do it for research. But then we do it as research. They go back. And then if there's enough data there that the FDA likes, then they approve it and come back to us as a commercial product.
Perfect. So would you like to highlight any specific one challenge, let's say, that will make the FDA stop or move forward with approving, regulating that medical extended reality product?
Well, it's good that I think there's been an evolution in the market now. The FDA realizes that in order to compete against other countries, you should be able to approve these more rapidly. And so they're now realizing that the standards that are used for clinical trials for drugs should be different than they're used for devices. So and then there's also, like, if you approve one device, you can use an 510K to then move. So a lot of companies actually evolve that way. They have a product, they use a 510K to then go to the next level, and they just slowly sort of creep their way to the final product they want to deploy and commercialize.
Perfect. So very good point out of the FDA starting to actually think about differentiating medical device from drugs kind of pathways. Any other from my colleagues want to have any input on that? Before we move to the next question, I think we have probably 20 minutes, right?
I'm not particularly expertise in regulatory, even if I'm a lawyer, but my practice in mostly intellectual property and technology areas. So, but I view that Excel is really important in the preventive healthcare. In cardiology, it's one of the good examples. But I think that I have intensive experience with how the immersive experience can bring cures in healthcare. And particularly, I'm interested in that they will have your, for example, the previous one there was some discussion about the avatar, right? So your avatar can be your patient is a twin, and then it can be like mimic all your personal health status, and then it'll be monitored in the visually monitored through your healthcare provider, and then they will know what happened in the future, and then proactively act to take care of your health. That's what I'm very interested in. And then it'll be particularly that for the cardiovascular case, actually for example, your like heart failure can happen anytime. And then for example, stroke can have a damage your brain in many aspects. So it can be, if it can be utilized in Excel and other digital technology to actually looking at a product, or can be in a moment actually they can find out, and then they can have a proactive way to act, and then it'll be fantastic, right? And then our life expectancy will be increased a lot, right? That's one as a technologist I'm very interested to implement in actual life.
Well, thank you. That's a great point, and that leads me to my next question, which is AI can be perceived as a threat to women's cardiovascular health. Now, which in another word can worsen the existing gender disparities for women's health in cardiovascular. A parallel revolution of legislation may be needed. What are the measures that can be deployed by us, physician scientists and entrepreneurs, to minimize these disparities and address what could be threatening to women cardiovascular health?
Well, I think the limitation of AI applied at any hospital is that if you only have a small data set of that one particular hospital, or one particular region, then you will have disparities that exist. And I think the only way to avoid that is to have the largest data set you can have. So you can certainly pilot it at your institution, prove its worth, but then it's not applicable. Just because it works at Mass General doesn't mean it'll work at Boston University or even somewhere else. And so you have to essentially find the population that's wide enough that represents the largest range and then test it on that.
Amazing. So I think Raul is just referring to the fact that we need to streamline more data from wearables and include more women, which has been historically a challenge. Why don't we have a lot of data on women? Because women kind of more hesitated in being accepting recruitment in clinical trials, just historically. Now with the wearable device, we're just overcoming that challenge, and we will have more big data streamlining from a technology such as my colleague's technology here. And that will lead to more data and more analysis and more AI and more understanding of cardiovascular outcomes in women. And so,
actually another story to say, we were actually doing a study of looking at chest X-rays, and it turns out that the algorithm could very quickly identify who was man and who was a woman. And we were like shocked, like how could it do, like what, is it looking at, soft tissues, what is it looking at? It turns out that it was actually looking at the names. So that in this data set, you have to be careful because there is a black box that exists with the data. And even though there's data put in and there's an output that sometimes you're happy with, you have to understand, well, why did that output come out? And it turns out for this particular study that we're doing, the algorithm is actually looking at the name, and it was able to determine based on the name who was male, who was female. So you got to be careful about these things.
And maybe in the near future, we will have a digital twin for women that's different than men, and then AI can read if it's for a man or a woman, right? Okay, well, let's move to the other question here. AI is a powerful computational technique to be applied to cardiovascular imaging. Again, it's all about you, this discussion looks like. For cardiovascular risk stratification, AI can quantify biomarkers from image data.
Yeah, so as I said, I'm not a cardiac imager, but I do interact with them quite a bit, and there's a lot of advances in analyzing images to determine many things. So, for example, the most important thing is how likely is someone going to get a heart attack. And so there are things that are looking at calcium scores of the vessels and things like that. But there's also, we've advanced to the point that now simple MRI can tell you so much data. It can tell you the ejection fraction of the patient. How well is the heart beating, and then the risk of coronary disease. And so it is amazing that there are so many inventive people out there that feed the stuff into a device, an algorithm, and then come up with data, and then ask questions of that and say, can this help me with this? And we're moving. And I think in the next 5-10 years, as radiologists, we're always worried that we'll be replaced. But in reality, I think the way it's going to work is that when I read any film, that supplemental data will be delivered to me. So when I'm reading it, I will certainly interpret it, but then the ejection fraction, the risk for heart disease will all be sort of printed out for me, and then I will include that in the report. So I don't think I'll ever be replaced, but I'll be supplemented.
It's very hard to be replaceable, just trust me on that. I don't think it will happen ever. But let's just ask this question as well here. How can we benefit from these innovations that are now existing and probably coming up in the next 5 to 10 years to individualize cardiovascular risk prediction? Would you like to speak to that?
So, very great points actually by Raul. And so, what was the question?
How do you think, for example, from the work that you've done so far on digital twins, that the data streamlining from that particular innovation using AI on it, how can we utilize that to individualize cardiovascular health for patients?
Absolutely. So we have a ton of data right out there. There are millions of population data sets, like the MIMIC data sets, like the Mayo platform, 3 million data points. But really, I think the future of cardiology, at least the digital health of cardiology, is going to depend on not just the generalized population data sets, but also individualized patients' data. And by that I mean basically a technology like the digital twin technology that's able to basically be trained on all the data that are out there, but also takes into account the individual's personalized cardiovascular characteristics, like the size of arteries, like the ejection fraction, male, female, all the demographics, and things like that. And so I think that the future of cardiology is going to really depend on a sort of a hybrid, so to say, it's a hybrid deep learning model that is able to take in the static data from the patient's EHR and all the data sets, as well as transient data. And by transient data, basically data from your wearables, data from any other tools that are able to get from the intraoperative room, for instance, when you're going through a surgery, and then be able to supplement that AI and make it more patient-specific. One of the problems that really exists today, in terms of a lot of software as a medical device or medical devices coming into the market, is you ask doctors, they're like, yeah, this technology was great, I used it for a bit, but then it wasn't really accurate on some other patients. And the reason for that is because of exactly what Raul mentioned. You take that model, you train it based on limited data sets, and you expect it to work for every population. And that doesn't work. And that's why a lot of these new technologies have a low specificity. They have great sensitivity, but they have low specificity, which means that it's not patient-specific. And so bringing in the digital twin model is making sure that every patient's individual cardiovascular system is now modeled correctly and is able to implement and augment the data sets.
Super great point. So the AI is going to be like the power the medical extended reality to make it individualized for our patients. And then let's move to a little bit different point here. Speaking about telemedicine, I know my colleagues before were talking about telemedicine has been existing for years and years. But how about using telemedicine, medical extended reality, and AI? So initially, telemedicine was developed for astronauts during space missions, and is now being applied on Earth in our healthcare system. So here the point that I'm trying to make, and the question is, this is an emerging way of delivering cardiac care as well. Can you discuss how clinicians can observe physiological parameters remotely and intervene efficiently in a timely manner?
So what is interesting in the evolution of this is that so much data is being collected. So much. I mean, right now I have an Aura ring, and it's like telling me how I sleep, you know. And people are now realizing that by analyzing this data and then feeding the algorithms, you can ask questions. Now, in terms of like cardiac and telemedicine, there are ways now where you can view someone's face and see a lot of information can be obtained. You know, are they febrile or not? What is their blood flow of their face? And that actually gives you information about how well is their heart beating, you know. So I think for like a big academic center for us, telemedicine is the future. You know, it is so busy to bring people into the hospitals are so overwhelmed. And so we are now starting to move patients out. Why don't we do care in your house? Why don't we be able to monitor you in your house? And a lot of this involves viewing people, but also not just the physical side of a person, but also the analysis of what you see from them. You know, I'm sure there'll be algorithms that'll be able to look at someone's eye, and so based on the eye, they're going to have this neurological issue or this cardiac issue. And so it is interesting how this technology will help physicians essentially supplement what their clinical realm is in medicine. You know, meaning I can look at a patient, but if I have supplemental data that's given to me by the air that tells me how well the heart beats in that house.
And most recently also, which was presented last year at the American Heart Association, we have now an AI for voice predicting heart failure and heart failure exacerbation and readmission. How about that? You can just tell from the voice of the patient.
Yeah. In addition to actually in a few days actually there will be another event about the generative AI for telemedicine. So actually the papers are difficult to have in the virtual space to talk with your doctor. So the AI can have to the patient to discuss with the practitioners and their doctors very easily. They bring over like easy education about the patient, and then what kind of drug treatment and what kind of they expecting. So they provide some educational things, and then to make a conversation easily. So that's another trend actually the AI explore, and particularly like a generative AI like ChatGPT, large language model, And additionally, recently I focused on several topics. How about digital health can be included in the mainstream health? And I found particularly I'm interested is that what we have done in the physical space, like for example, you have a treatment through the clinic and doctor care about you and provide a prescription and you get the drug, and then you have a treatment in the home and everything. I think we can do it in the virtual space. That's already fine. So recently I have focused on whether it can be implemented like telehealth and home care, and then including like for example digital diagnostics and digital therapeutics and remote patient monitoring. If you combine, you can think of combine them, right? What you have done in the physical space can be done everything in the virtual space, right? So it is fantastic. It can be like one of the three key factors that they think of a challenge in the healthcare is how to value, cost down, and accessible, right? The three challenges, right? It can be handled through this digital space, right? So I find this so fascinating. I've been looking at how can I design it and make it happen in real life.
So we can all observe the passion associated with these three together, right? And that's, I think, what will create an efficient telemedicine system in the very near future. And like everyone else is saying, it's here to stay, and it's actually happening. If we have more time, I don't know, do we have more time or not? But I would like to conclude with that. We'd stop. Okay. So, well, it's been a pleasure moderating this panel, and I look forward to more presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.